will. See you. Bye-bye. Thank you.
Right, that's Juan Carlos and Afro-Cuban All-Stars. They're going to be in town this weekend, and we'll find out where the Hamilton is. And like I mentioned, tomorrow, Dr. Inoka Rashidi's going to be here. He's got some interesting observation on his recent trip to Cuba and also Mexico. 800-450-7876. Our next guest is an activist, he's an author, he's a filmmaker. His name is Jeremiah Camara. Jeremiah, welcome back to WOL Radio.
Hey, thanks, Brother Nelson. Thanks for having me.
Got to have you back, brother. You know, the last time you were on, people says we need to hear more of that young man. So that's why we reached out to you, because you claim that help us explore the social and psychological impact of blind belief, as it's called, and the side effects of religious intoxication. You also say that the most faith-filled, high-praising, God-fearing people are ensconced or at the very bottom, trapped at the bottom of every aspect of society. I want you to take that last phrase first and tell us why because I think this quote is attributed to you. The most faith-filled, high-praising, God-fearing people are ensconced or at the bottom of every aspect of society. How so?
Well, first you have to look at the picture. You know, I was in Chicago back in 2012, 2013 on the west side of Chicago, and it was just inundated with churches, and it's not uncommon to find that in black communities. And so if the so-called spirit of God dwells within, you know, these churches, then why are the areas laden with so many problems? Why are there litter, you know, trash just all on the streets? You always tend to know when you're in a predominantly black neighborhood because, like children, we throw stuff out the window and expect for someone else to pick it up, just like we expect for something or someone to escort us to a better place and time and supernaturally rid us of all of the problems. It's these false expectations that we have. It's these unrealistic expectations that we have. And so there's an elephant in the room, and it's obvious that there's a disconnect, you know, between the head and the body. The church claims it is the body of the people, the body of Christ, as they call it. Well, we're walking around looking very peculiar because what are we taking in during church service and applying outside of the church? We should be much more productive, but it goes back to time. You know, as far as time goes, our churches, we're hijacked every Sunday. Time is an investment, and it is your most valuable commodity. So what is it that you're receiving during these many hours that you spend in church that you apply outside the church? There's a disconnect, there's a problem, and we need to be talking about it on a constant basis instead of trying to cover it up and say, hey, well, my church is doing this. And I mean, everyone's going to claim that their church is doing a fantastic job. But I mean, if that was the case, why are we having so many issues, you know, as a people? So the church has limited black progress, and it will continue to do so unless we face this elephant in the room.
Well, let me ask you this, though. Can you, well, before we do that, let me just give the address for the Hamilton. People call about Juan Carlos. The Hamilton is located at 614th Street Northwest, D.C. That's 614th Street Northwest, and the phone number is 202-787-1000. If you can get that information, just call the studio. I'll make sure they have it for you. But Jeremiah, can you blame the black church, the fact that the condition of our communities? Can you really point the finger at the black church? Is it their fault that our communities are in shambles?
Well, let me say this: no one else is making the claims that someone else that this God is going to take care of all your problems. No one else is making those claims. The church makes the boldest claims. If you trust in God, if you tithe, if you believe, and all these things, the church, the claims rest squarely on the shoulders of the church. Now, let me get back to time for a second. If we just take a conservative estimate, there's still a disproportionate amount of time that we spend in church. Every Sunday, let's just say 5 hours, because you need prep time, you know, getting ready, you know, to go and attendance, fellowshipping, your drive home, all of that kind of stuff. That adds up to about 260 hours a year. Now, if we include 3 hours or 2 hours on Wednesday Bible study, that brings us to 156 hours per year. When you add those numbers, that's approximately 400 hours a year. Now, keep in mind, this doesn't include the events that we attend. the venues around the country, the drive it takes to get there, men's night, women's night, family night, pastor appreciation night, all of these things, the retreats and all these other extracurricular activities. But when you're talking about 400 hours. Now, you multiply that by 10 years, that's 4,000 hours or more of our lives involved, in the church. That is one heck of an investment. So there's a ton of time spent worshiping, praising, shouting, and listening and testifying, mainly the things that you've already heard your whole life. If we're honest with ourselves, you hear the same stuff over and over and over every Sunday. Where is the evidence in our children's education, in our health, in our monetary power? How are believers different from those who don't attend church regularly? So imagine if this excess time spent in church was applied toward educational endeavors, such as learning a particular skill or trade. We cannot ignore that.
Well, let me ask you this: is the same criteria as well for the mosque, for Islam, for that religion as well? Or is just Christianity?
Anytime Christianity is mainly what we, were dealt during our enslavement period. So it was one of the things that, they gave us to basically say, hey, stay out of grown folks' business. It was a distraction. One of the things that attracted us to the church during our enslavement period was the fact that while we were in church and while we were being preached to, we weren't laboring in the sun. We weren't being beaten. So that's one of the reasons why we spend this inordinate amount of time in church. There are certain traditions that carry over. It's Christianity, basically, that tradition. But I would say, as far as Islam and any other religion, that is expecting something other than human involvement. For every so-called miracle, I can guarantee you there is a human being behind it. But this expectation that someone is going to do something for you or that God is going to take care of it is not based on reality, and it is a very dangerous thing that we're dealing with. When you look at the civil rights movement, it created also, it was steeped in the church. And a lot of people will say, well, hey, we wouldn't have these things if it wasn't for the church. It wasn't necessarily the religion or the church. The church was all we had, first of all. That's the only safe place that we could gather. But what the strength behind the civil rights was the church's ability to galvanize people as a meeting place. But what it did was it created a mindset and an unrealistic expectation to believe that in order for blacks to rise to prominence, there has to be some type of grand movement.
Right. Hang on a second, Jeremiah. We got to take a quick break here. Hang on a sec. I'll let you finish your thought on the other side. We already got some people want to speak to you at 800-450-7876. We'll take your calls next on FM 95.9 and AM 1450 WOL, where information is power.
Nelson Show is here daily, 4 to 7 p.m. on WOL, News Talk 1450 AM and 95.9 FM.
And thanks for rolling with us, folks. Our guest is activist, author, filmmaker. His name is Jeremiah Camara. You probably heard of him. He's been here before, actually. And he just says that going to church and reading the Bible totally just a waste of time. He started out telling us how much time has been wasted just going to church on a regular. 800-450-7876 to speak to him. So, Jeremiah, I'm going to let you finish up what you were saying before we let for the traffic and weather update.
Well, I was saying, the civil rights movement is tied to the church. So a lot of people would give credit to the church, but simply it was a place. The church was the only place that we could meet safely. But what it did was it created a mindset that there has to be some type of movement or some type of grand revolution, some type of major event. It also created a biblical kind of Moses, lead my people to the promised land mentality, that there must be a leader to take us to the promised land. And then we had this, this thing called we shall overcome the white man, overcome the system, overcome the devil. But when you think of that word overcome, we often neglect to think of it in terms of ourselves, overcoming our own shortcomings and our own deficiencies. The revolution is checking your child's homework. That's what's not going to be televised. The revolution is carefully choosing whom you're going to have children with, eating healthy, exercise, picking up the trash in your neighborhood. That's the movement. That's the revolution that we speak of. So we need to make sure that, we don't look for this person to come out of the church anymore. Dr. Martin Luther King is not coming around anymore. Neither is Jesus or anybody else to come and save black people. We are totally and solely dependent upon ourselves. It's going to take human work, human sacrifice, human effort, human money, human will to change our conditions. And you can pray until the cows come home, and nothing is going to be done about it. And that's called insanity. You will go to church year in, year out, decade after decade, and things get worse. That's called insanity, to keep doing the same thing and expecting a different result.
All right, let me ask you this then before I go to the calls, because already some folks want to speak to you. When you see our young people wilding out, do you think if they were in the church, if they were church members, they would be acting like that?
Well, let me just say this. There's a lot of people that when their children get in trouble, one of the first things that they do, they say, well, he needs to be in church or this and that. But, Tyrone, I'm just using that name. If your name is Tyrone, then, this is not directed towards you, but we need skills. If they're not teaching you how to put up ceiling fans or change a thermostat or change a radiator in a car or put up roofing shingles, then no, the church is not going to be the best place for them. The school is. You can preach until you're black and blue in the face, and that's still not going to teach these young men, how to put hardwood floors in, or how to, change an alternator in a car. So you need skills. We are lacking skills, and we have too much real estate out here that's being used very sparingly, mainly on Sundays, sometimes Fridays, sometimes Wednesdays, and they can be converted into places of learning. You have a lot of so-called leaders that are pontificating the problem. We are master articulators of the problem. And
but Jeremiah, I hate to interrupt, but going back to the original question is, you on the bus, on the train, you hear the inappropriate language and the behavior, smoking weed, doing all of that.
Right.
Do you think if the young person, male or female, are in church, they would behave that way? That's my question.
I would say that probably not to the degree that we do. But they're still not going to teach them a skill. They still need to be learning a trade and learning a skill. You got to remember, they are the products of parents who did go to church, who did pray that they wouldn't be out here in the street, who have prayed that they wouldn't have gone to jail, who did say, I'm going to put it in the Lord's hand. I'm just going to trust in the Lord. I know my son is out there, but I'm going to put it in God's hands. And they still wind up, in jail or even worse. So even though they may not be going to church, they are the products of generations that have gone to church. And you cannot pass on Jesus to them. That is not something something that they can benefit from. They can benefit from learning a skill. They can benefit from going to school and learning a trade. Trades, skills pay the bills, and the building block of all families, of all societies, is the family unit. And where you have a strong family, you have a strong society.
All right, let's take some calls for you. 800-450-7876. Out of the box on line 2. Brother Raymond's reaching out to us. He's calling from Ohio. Brother Raymond, you're on with Jeremiah.
Yes, sir, Brother Jeremiah. Peace and blessings to you, my black brother.
Peace and blessings, brother.
Yes, sir. My question is this, in a short comment. My question is, do you think that Christianity, and I'm going to include Islam, is worse than crack when it comes to black people? That's my question. Okay. My comment is, most black Christians here in these United Snakes of America, they use the official Bible of the Church of England as their one and only Bible. Now, where in this book, good brother, does it say that this deity called God is the author? And I'll answer it for you. Nowhere. Now, don't you think it's amazing, Brother Carl and my brother, how these creatures tell their parishioners, to give them 10% of their earnings to get to heaven, while they drive around in Benzos, Lexos, Rolls Royces, wear tailor-made suits, while their parishioners catch cabs and buses to worship them. And I'm going to close with this. What most so-called Christians don't know is that Queen James, and Brother Jeremiah, I know you know that boy was a homosexual, was the so-called King of England, and he had nothing to do with that book called the Bible, which is full of fables. It's really, our people are sick. And I'm going to leave you with this, and I'm out of here. No African person, tribe, or nation worshipped an image of God before the white boy came, okay? And where is this God that continues to let all foreigners kill, beat, shoot, and annihilate us? The very letters G-O-D stand for Great Old Devil, and it's similar to the Great White Whale because they both kill, destroy, and devour us. Y'all have a good day, bro, and answer that question for me about that Christianity crack. Peace.
All right, thanks. Well, let me say this about the crack. It is an addiction. See, because there are 5 basic reasons. I think I mentioned this on the last show. And you have to go through the same steps that you would have to go through to get rid of any other drug. First is fear. You fear that if you let go of these mythologies, is what they are. It's very difficult to admit that we've been hoodwinked and we've been had. See, because a good slave, we're still being good. A bad slave, when he's forced to accept his master's religion, his master's book, he's going to ask his master some questions. He's going to say, what is this so-called holy book, this holy word? Where did you get it? Who gave it to you? Why are you giving it to me? And how is it going to help me be free? But a good slave will never question any of that. They'll just say, well, this is my faith. This is what my mama did, and this is what my daddy did, so I'm going to pass it on to my children. And so we have a long-term addiction because we're afraid. You got fear, number one. Fear of God's punishment, if I start to question it. Fear of criticism, fear of backlash and rejection from our family and our friends. We got pride. No one wants to think that all the money that they put into this church for all of these years was for nothing, for your preacher to drive around in his fancy car, and you, like he said, come to church in buses and cabs. No one wants to admit that they were wrong. Something they've invested so much time, money, and energy in is false. Number 3 is separation anxiety from your church members and your pastors. What am I going to do on Sundays? I don't see sister such and such. I have a separation anxiety. Another one is a God void. What am I going to do? Who am I going to worship? What do I replace this guy with? The 5th is betrayal. I feel as though I am betraying my grandmother who raised me in the church. I'm betraying my aunt who was the deacon. I'm betraying my uncle who was the pastor. And so once you come to grips with this thing, now you got to go through the 5 stages of grief, which is denial, anger, bargaining, depression, and acceptance. Accept the fact that we are not changing, despite the fact that the mega churches have increased over the years. Church attendance has increased over the years. TV evangelicals have increased over the years, but we have progressively regressed over the years. We are on a conveyor belt system of going to prison, yet there's a church on every corner. We have to admit that we have been had and we have been hoodwinked. If this Bible had the power to liberate you, why aren't you liberated, first of all, and why would your slave master have given it to you in the first place?
All right, hold that thought because we're coming up on a break. And, you know, I my question before I take some more calls, and a lot of people from all across the country want to speak to you. The Nation of Islam, MGT, FOI, we've seen the nation clean up drug addicts, pimps, hoes, the whole 9 yards, and put them back into society. I'm just wondering if what you're saying jives with what the Nation of Islam has done. And I'll let you give you a response on the other side, because we got to take a quick break here.
Okay.
Folks, you too can line up. I need to hear from some Bible scholars too. If you're in them, because our guest is Jeremiah Camara. He says the masjid, the mosque, the church, waste of time for us. What are your thoughts? 800-450-7876. We'll take your calls next on FM 95.9 and AM 1450 WOL, where information is power.
On the morning show, and Carl Nelson in the afternoon on 1450 and 95.9 WOL.
Thank you for rolling with us, folks. Interesting conversation going on right now with our guest, Jeremiah Camara. Jeremiah is an activist. He's an author. He's a filmmaker. Film, by the way, I think it's called Contradiction. You got to check that out. And basically what he's saying, go to church or go to the mosque or the masjid. It's just a waste of time. We just wasted too much time, and it's especially impactful on black folks. Before we left, my question, and I'll repeat the question again for you, Jeremiah. The Nation of Islam, because we've seen the MGT, we've seen the FOI, we've seen how they've cleaned up brothers and sisters who were on drugs and just beat down and really turn their lives around. So what do you say about that? Would you say that was a waste as well?
Absolutely not. My hat goes off to them, and I didn't necessarily put it as a waste of time. I said we are wasting too much time. Let's put it like that. But let me say this. The Nation of Islam, those brothers and sisters that are doing these outstanding jobs, those are simply decisions by human beings to do something about their neighborhood. It has nothing to do with religion or their God. I mean, you can go up there and you can say, well, I bear witness that no other God is before Allah. That's just a claim. There are 300 million gods in the world, and everybody thinks their God is the right God. So there are just as many secular groups that are doing well. There are individuals that are doing well. You know, if you get your individual house together, it bodes well for the people at large, because the most powerful force in this universe is a mentor. And once I can look at you and see that you're doing well, you inspire me. But those are simply people making decisions to help other people. It's not a magical God that come down and made them help people. And, you know, they may have been inspired to do that, but at the end of the day, it's not their God. And if you think that there is a God, then we are just naive to the way placebos work, which is really what it is. It's a placebo. So you may think that going to church is, you know, is the reason why you got your job or why you got your promotion or why your disease went away. But behind every one of those miracles, so-called miracles, there's a human being behind it. There's a boss who gave you a raise. There's a doctor who went to school for 13 years. There was a medical treatment that helped you. There was food that you ate. There were people behind you.
All right. Hang on. As I mentioned, I got a bunch of folks who want to reach you. 800-450-7876 is the way to get to our guest, Jeremiah Camara. If you've never heard about him, just Google him while you're waiting. Let's go out to Virginia on line 3. Hamid is joining us. Hamid, you're on with Jeremiah.
Hello, Carl, Brother Jeremiah. How you doing?
I'm great, brother. How are you?
Very good. Hey, I want to make a comment, and then on top of that, you can please, continue that. But I want to give you a real a testament here. I was in Baltimore 9 years old. We lived 3 doors down from a large church. And the people who came to this church, I mean, we were poor in resources, but we were rich in spirit, rich in dignity. And the people who would go to this church, they'd pull up in their fancy cars, and they wouldn't so much as look in my direction. And I'd be sitting down on the steps, and I'd say, hello, sir, hello, ma'am. After a while, I just gave up. I asked my mother, why don't they speak to me? She said, some people have problems. I didn't know how to translate that. So I said, well, what are they learning in this church, in this place that was built like a castle on blocks where every other home was abandoned and broken down and everything, and it was the most lavish, huge structure in the neighborhood? She said they're learning about God. I thought, well, that must be important. Perhaps what it is that they're learning about is at odds with who I am. Maybe I'm evil, right? I was confused. And as a youngster, 9 to 10 years old, I sat down. I never ever forget this. One of the most important lessons I've learned in my life. I sat down with a piece of paper in the most basic sense that I could figure, and I made a list of all attributes that I, in my young mind, thought was good and what was evil. And I found, kindness to others, kindness to animals, things of that sort. And it turned out that the people who were going to this church failed my little rudimentary elementary test, and I was coming out and I passed it. Now, and that gave me a big sense of self-esteem boost because they had really dented it pretty poorly. Now, fast forward about 25 years from then, I joined the Navy, and it was doing pretty good, buying nice cars and homes and all that stuff, and went back to the neighborhood. And just for nostalgic reasons, sat on the very same steps. Now, twice as many homes were abandoned, the complete devastated neighborhood. But the church was still standing there, just as untouched. And what happened was the leader of the church, dressed in some elaborate getup, his outfit and everything, flanked by two youngsters, came out to talk to a parishioner while I was sitting there. I thought, wow, I never had the courage to actually talk to these people for so many years. Now I'm an adult. Let me go and walk up to them. So I walk up to him, and I say, well, it's a shame what happened to the neighborhood. And then he looks at me, he says, yeah, it is. He said, but, don't worry about it. He said, because the white people are going to be moving back soon. He said, that's why I always go to the city meetings and planning meetings. I tell them, never touch any of our property. Now, at this point, my stomach kind of just dropped because he had confirmed the things that I had been confused so badly about as a youngster. And so I think what the problem is with many of us is that a lot of us are jumping, we're running past the crawling stage, and we're trying to run. The first thing what people have to do is get courage to do the right thing. Trying to seek out religion without having courage is what you're saying, to think for oneself.
I tell you what, Hamid, because we got a bunch of folks. Can you put in a question for him so Jeremiah can respond?
Oh, yeah. Well, Brother Jeremiah, please just, if you could just speak to the point that I'm making here, I'll be satisfied with that, brother.
Okay.
All right.
Yeah, thanks for your call. Listen, one of the greatest insults, this is directly goes to your question. One of the greatest insults to humanity is to believe that you are not already complete, that you were not born complete, to believe that there is something inherently deficient in you the way that you were born, and that you needed a book that was forced on you by your oppressors. Your father's sperm would not have swam upwards through a downward current, latched on to an egg, and started the process of fertilization, and your mother wouldn't have gone through a 40-week gestation period, generated milk in her breast, etc., if you were not prepared for this world. This world had everything in it that you needed, okay, chemically, anatomically, biologically. And so you had everything that you need to sustain life. We were adequately prepared for life in all of its hardships and rewards. And when you did that evaluation of these gods, of what God is and all this kind of stuff, you were on the right track. Because when we look around and we see all of these things, it is, circumstantial evidence. You say, well, there has to be a God because there has to be a very large man who did all of these things. That's what gods are. They are exaggerations of ourselves. Gods were invented to explain natural phenomenon and to manipulate the events and circumstances beyond the control of man. The Bible is the source, and the Quran, that tells us about these God characters. But how would we know about these characters if it weren't for the Bible? What would our concept of a God be then? Will we even have a concept? Without the Bible, there's no creation story, no Adam and Eve, no Moses, no promised land, no parting of the waters, no Joseph, no Mary, none of that. So all of these stories and characters are inextricably linked to this God character. So if one's information about the God they believe in comes from a book, then that means that if their book didn't exist, neither would their God or their particular brand of faith. This God character is a pretense or an alibi that's been used for centuries to conquer and control people. God characters are only psychological. The reason why we know that is because we still have slavery, we still have war, we still have hunger, we still have poverty, murder, pollution all over the world. And because they're not answered, your belief system within its doctrine has to have these built-in excuse mechanisms. Like, well, he has a greater plan. Well, he might not come when you want him. Or, well, God knows best, and all of these things, because your God is at the mercy of time like everyone else, because he cannot answer things instantaneously.
All right. Let's take some more calls for you. 800-450-7876. Let's go to D.C. Sam's on line 4. Sam, you're on with Jeremiah.
Yes. Hello?
You're on the air.
Oh, yes. How you doing, Carl and Brother Jeremiah?
Hey, brother.
He has practically said everything that I thought about the church. You know, about it was created to control you in slavery and all of that. And I've heard Dr. Claude Anderson say it's about 180 to 185,000 churches in America. I mean, if all those people go to church and pray every Sunday for the same thing and nothing never happens, I mean, it seems like there's no changes that come about. So how can you keep saying that it's working? I mean, I don't understand that. But if you try to tell somebody that goes to church every Sunday, most people, you know, they would deny it or get mad or get upset with you. And another thing that he said about skills. I mean, why you think all these, well, I said foreigners coming over here and just jumping ahead of black people? Because they are doing all these skilled and unskilled jobs, and every black person over there that I say it, they are not college material. You got to get out there or go somewhere and learn a skill, and you'll come out ahead better than you would, setting up in church every Sunday. And the churches is closed practically 7 days a week. You could use them places, but
hang on a second, Sam. We got to take a quick break here and check the traffic and weather one more time in your town, and then we'll let you finish your question or your comment for Brother Jeremiah. Folks, you too can join the discussion. 800-450-7876. We'll take all your calls next as the big show rolls on from FM 95.9 and AM 1450 WOL, where information is power.
That's close to home. Close to home. Listen, WOL, News Talk 1450 AM and 95.9 FM.
And thanks for staying with us, folks. Our guest is Jeremiah Camara. You've probably heard about him. He's got a movie out. He's also an activist, an author, a filmmaker, and we're talking about the church and the mosque, religion, folks. What are your thoughts? 800-450-7876. Before we get back to Sam, who we were speaking with in the district, I want to remind you that Radio One, now called Urban One because they're the largest African-American owned and operated media company in the entire world, and it's also targeting African Americans, is somehow not included in the new National Museum of African American History and Culture. Now, it's worthy and a necessary campaign to be included for the tens of thousands of black folks, those on the air like us and those who are like you in the audience. For all of us, Radio One is our voice and main source of information and entertainment. It's also unparalleled. Radio One's impact is African American history and culture, so we're asking for your help to change that. Like right now, we want Urban One included in the museum. Please call the founding director. His name is Lonnie Bunch III. That's Lonnie Bunch III. His number is 202-633-4751. That's 202-633-4751. And we're going to keep this campaign going until Urban One's history is included in our museum. Coming up in the next few days, you're going to hear from Dr. Maulana Karenga. Dr. Karenga, of course, created Kwanzaa. He's going to join us. Also, Brother Kush, the Black Unifier from Positive Comedic Visions in Washington, D.C., and Dr. Renoka Rashidi, the traveling man who's just back from Cuba and Mexico, is going to join us. So tell your friends to keep it locked on FM 95.9 and AM 1450 WOL. Let's go back to Sam, as I mentioned in the district. Sam, can you put in a question for him so that Jeremiah can respond?
Well, what I don't understand about the church is, and God, so-called God, why does he mean for so many bad things to happen to black people? I mean, why he it just seems like he punishing black people. All these things has happened for
all right, that's a legitimate
years.
question, Sam. Let's give him a chance to respond. I thank you for your call. Jeremiah, why we get the short end of the stick?
Well, first of all, it's really something, and I'm going to use this term nomadic. Okay, so keep that in mind, because I don't want anybody calling up. We're not going to get into this discussion about the real Jews and all this stuff. I'm saying the nomadic Jews. Listen, we're the wrong character. We're like a character in the wrong movie. If you were to create a God, the reason why this God doesn't do anything for you is because you didn't invent him. The nomadic Jews invented him. That's why when you read the Old Testament, nomadic Jews, okay? That's why when you read the Old Testament, it's a story about if you mess with the Jews, I'm going to kick your butt. Go burn their village. Go pill. Oh, it's a very bloody group of books. It will turn your stomach. But it's all about if you mess with the Jews, this is what I want you to do. You don't mess with my people. I am the God of Israel, as it states in 43:3. And the reason that the Jews invented this God is because they were being expelled. They were homeless, and they were being expelled from many different countries around the world. So they needed to put a message to people that if you keep messing with us, our God is going to get you, okay? Now, here you are. That has nothing to do with you. Your God should have had nappy hair. It should have experienced Jim Crow. It should have been enslaved for 400 years. It should have known what being whipped was about. It should have picked cotton and all these things that you can relate to. Here we are worshiping a God, a man named Jesus, who had essentially had a bad weekend. He went from Friday to Sunday, got beat up, and even though this is a myth, because nobody ever existed by that name or had those attributes or ascended to heaven or walked on water. That's a story, people. But if you look at this God, he doesn't have anything in common with you. He didn't get whipped from the time he was a boy until the time he was a grown man. He didn't work in the field. He doesn't have your story. So the reason why your God doesn't do anything for you because you didn't create him. Now, one thing about it, your God is a God that, like I said, had essentially had a bad weekend. And here it is, you had your own ancestors enslaved and went through hell for 400 years and are still catching hell to this day, but yet you go and worship a man who essentially had a bad weekend, and it says that God gave his only begotten son. Of course you would give your only begotten son. You're God, so you knew you was going to get him back. So where was the risk involved for this made up God? That's why, and it will never do anything for you, because it's like, when you're going to church, you are praying to an invisible product. The God is that person who stares at you back in that mirror. The God is that woman that you lay next to at night. We are the gods and goddesses of our own story and of our own outcomes. And we need to take responsibility for that and quit expecting the God that was given to you, forced upon you by your oppressor, to do anything for you.
All right. I got a tweet question for you. They want you to explain the creation.
See, it's not up to me to explain creation. I just stated that, first of all, if I was going to explain creation, I would look to a scientist or an astrophysicist or a biologist. I wouldn't go to a preacher to explain that. It says in the beginning, not at the beginning. So when you say in the beginning, that shows that time came before your God. That's why your God is at the mercy of time, like everybody else. I can't sit here and explain this and this and that, but I do know that there is evidence that can stretch from New York City down to the end of Miami of evolution. I would trust a scientist, an astrophysicist, a biologist 7 days a week and twice on Sunday before I would a jackleg preacher sitting up preaching to me who just last week, was doing something that he's telling you not to do. So it's not my job to explain that. I know that I am, and I know that you are. And I know that if I worship you as a woman, I would never call you out your name. And I know if you worship me as a man, you would never raise a gun and shoot me or kill me. If we saw each other as gods and goddesses, we would have a much better community. We wouldn't be in the shape that we're in. But because we hate ourselves, it's easy for me to do wrong unto you because you are a reflection of myself. And your religion is a very selfish religion. If you just listen to the terminology, I'm blessed and highly favored. My God, I have a personal relationship with God. That is anti-village. You would be the same person say it takes a village to raise a child, but you're talking about I'm blessed as long as I get to heaven. You know, these things are contradictions. No, it does take a village, but we have a very selfish style of worship, selfish doctrines, selfish idioms, and yet we don't see it because of our pride. We don't want to be wrong about something that we have invested in for so long. But I'm going to tell you, when you live by the supernatural, you will die by it depending on the supernatural as well. And that's the situation that we find ourselves in.
And that's some real talk right there. 800-450-7876. Let's go to line 5. Miss Richardson's calling us from Chevy Chase in Maryland. Miss Richardson, you're on with Jeremiah.
Yes, thank you, dear, so much. And it's a pleasure to listen to this gentleman. I could listen to him all night over a cup of tea. He is absolutely on it about our selfish ways, our pride taking us over, having us go astray of each other's humanity. He is so absolutely what I've been trying to stress to not only my family, but everybody's. You know, I'm old now. But you see, he's right, Carl. Because for one thing, the way things are set up with religion, it's divisive. You know,
I tell you what, Ms. Richardson, why don't you put it in a question form so he can respond? Because we've got a lot of people want to speak to him.
Oh, okay, yeah, I was going to get to that, but I was just going to say the English, what they've done in Britain, you know, that did a lot to mix up people with their own. I want to ask him, does he believe in Black Judaism and the Ethiopian African blacks? Because I think theirs may be the original, but I don't know whether he believes in any of that or not. But I do believe in him, Carl, when this man is saying he's right. I mean, we have to stop our selfish ways, help each other, and look to becoming mentors or something. Because, see, the way it is now, he's right about how the world is now. It's full of just pride and greed. And really, the white, does he believe also, and one more thing, white racism and white supremacy taking over our minds the way they've been programming and conditioning? And thank you so much.
All right.
Okay, she asked me about certain gods. I believe in myself. I believe in the people that are around me. Belief is a dangerous thing. I would rather know that there was something lurking behind those bushes rather than believe that there was nothing and then get eaten. So I don't operate off the premise of belief. Either I know something or I do not know something. Now, when we talk about believing in a God, there's a lot of people say, man, this God of Ethiopia, this God of Egypt, this God of this. Well, let me tell you, that God didn't stop you from getting on that ship. If that black God loved you so much, then the Nina, the Pinta, and the Santa Maria and the good ship Jesus would have sank. So what did this God ever do for you?
That's a mic drop right there. 800-450-7876. Leroy's reaching out to us. He's calling from Pennsylvania. He's on line 6. Leroy, young with Jeremiah.
Hi. How you doing? I'm a Christian. I don't believe in a religion or anything like that. And I just like to put this out there for everybody. Believe however you want to believe and stuff like that. I do believe in doing research and reading it and stuff like that. Where you're coming from, I just like to put a question for you. Say like people follow you, accept your philosophy or whatever you want to categorize it as, and then I guarantee you after 10 or 20 years, everybody's going to dissect it and take a piece of it like they want to take of it. Probably 100 years from now, it'll be like the religions now. So I'm not down with the religion either. And how can I put it? For the people who want to question about God and stuff like that, believe. I'm not telling you how to believe. All I ask, and I've been saying this for the longest, do your own research. I say this to Jehovah Witnesses, different kind of Christians, whatever they call themselves, because I don't believe in the labels either. Read it. Please read it, then do the research with the history about it. You're going to find out this is not a European religion. Most of the things that you're talking about are in there. The Bible is a thick book, right? It got Ezekiel, Isaiah, all these kind of books about prophecies and stuff like that. And we usually take line by line and dissect it by there. There's also prophecies about Ethiopians, about Africa. God lifts them up. He is also prophecy about him scattering them to the ends of the world. And if you read it, he preaches against the Europeans. When the prophecies about the four beasts with Daniel, the last beast is the Roman Empire, which he said has 10 horns, we shall be plucked up. And I know you don't believe any of those words, but it's actually against the last kingdom, which is, the United States. It said the feet of iron and clay, and they shall be, whatever. But I'm just putting that out there. You should do your research. Don't follow anybody. That's all I'm saying. Not even what I'm saying.
Because we're coming up on a break, and I'll let him respond on the other side. Leroy, thank you for your call. Jeremiah says, he's ready. Folks, you too can join this discussion. Reach out to us. It's 800-450-7876. Our guest is Jeremiah Camara. Again, he's an activist, he's an author, he's a filmmaker, and we'll take your calls for him next, right here on FM 95.9 and AM 1450 WOL, where information is power.
Now back to the Carl Nelson Show
on Washington, D.C.'s 1450.
1450 WOL Radio.
Thanks for rolling with us, folks. 800-450-7876. Our guest is Jeremiah Camara. He's an activist. He's an author. He's a filmmaker. And he's going to answer those questions we got from Philly. I think it was Pennsylvania, actually, our last caller. I think his name was Leroy. So, Jeremiah, your response. I know you're chomping at the bit to respond to what, because he said he was a Christian.
Well, not really. I'm not going to, I wasn't chomping at this, but let me just say this. All that's good. Okay, what it says and what it prophesied and all that stuff. We're talking about right now. Your God is not stopping bullets. He's not stopping the abuse of authority by the police. He's not stopping the prison industrial complex. Only conscientious thinking, diligent and consistent effort and strategic planning on behalf of human beings will solve our problems. That's it. You can pontificate what's between the pages of Genesis and Revelations for another decade, and we will be worse off than what we are right now until we stare this monster in the eye. I wanted to get back to the lady who mentioned racism. She asked me, what do I think about the racism? It was the Bible that has had the greatest influence on race relations in this country, because the precepts that were spelled out the relationships between the master and the slave. And the most fundamental precept of slavery was that God divinely ordained whites to be superior and rule over the inferior blacks. And these precepts of black inferiority, they became the general rules that regulated the thoughts and behavior of even the poorest whites. And you still see that phenomenon happening today. And these precepts of inferiority, they found their way into the legal structure of slavery. That's why you find the injustice, the disparagement between blacks and whites when we're in front of the judge. These precepts, see, that's why laws can change and amendments can be added over time, but precepts linger. For example, the 13th Amendment, it did not and could not abolish the precept of black inferiority. Why? Because that notion of black inferiority was a state of mind. It didn't owe its existence to the legal process. So what we are experiencing today are the echoes of that era. Black enslaved, we have been hit. Slavery was an earthquake, and we are still feeling the aftershocks of that quake. But here in Atlanta, you have our HBCUs. All of them have been in trouble. Clark Atlanta was hit hard. Morris Brown hit hard especially. And instead of dealing with this thing through strategic planning, through diligent and consistent effort and thinking and holding meetings and applying our intelligence to it, we have a day of prayer. We're 1.3 or $2 million, whatever, behind, and we're going to have a day of prayer. Prayer, people, is not a plan. You got 10,000 people moving to Atlanta a month, and most of them are black folk, based off of the reality shows that they're seeing on television. And I know this because I have a business that sees a lot of out-of-towners, and I ask them, and they'll tell me, well, I just put it in God's hands. I just have faith. That's not a plan. And that's why so many are struggling down here. Prayer is a poor investment that you cannot pass on to your children. And one of the reasons why my family has been able to avoid debt is because we don't give our money to these preachers. The first rule of acquiring wealth is to pay yourself first, not the preacher. If your God has many mansions, as it says in the Bible, and the streets of gold, and he's got cattle on 1,000 hills, why does he need your little paper Federal Reserve notes?
Another mic drop. I'm glad you said that because somebody tweeted and said, tell that brother I'm praying for him. And he started off with praying. I guess there was some kind of divine intervention there. 800-450-7876. Speaking about Atlanta, let's go to the ATL. Robert's waiting for us on line 2. Robert, you're on with Jeremiah.
I just kind of find it just hilarious that a filmmaker, who, you called him that several times and he hadn't denied it, would come on and say things that are negative about the belief system that has shown to black people the greatest sense of self-worth and when it was, the more people went to church, the more progress we made towards the goals that we want to make as a free people. But I want to say this right quick, and I want to ask him a question. He inferred, he said that slavery was an earthquake. It was an earthquake, and we experienced the aftershocks. So that seems to say that he does believe that slavery is a thing of the past, and I do too. But when you compare what, and this is the question for you, when you compare what the filmmaking industry has done, and I think what it has done mostly is promote violence and perverted behavior. Compare it to what the churches have done, whether or not the head of the church or the preachers got rich or not, what they put into black people. Do you really think you have a right to sit here and criticize the church after what the film industry has done and it continues to do daily? They don't promote anything positive, but the church at least does promote you seem like we're both the church and your side, and I'm on the church side, seem like you're saying that both sides really should be looking out for our prosperity because you just said the reason why your family's done well, so you want everybody to do well. But filmmakers don't seem to be saying that. And my question to you is, how do you even think you got credibility saying that? But in closing, I would like to make one more statement. Where the problem is in the home. Our children and our offspring, whether they go to the church or whether they go to see a movie, they're going to have a home somewhere, good home or bad home. Anybody looking for a solution to our problems and not looking at the home first is greatly mistaken. Thank you for taking my call.
All right. Thanks, Robert. This guy from your hometown, Jeremiah, your response.
Well, maybe he just came on because I definitely put the responsibility on the home several times during this interview. Second of all, I'm not a Hollywood filmmaker. I'm a documentary filmmaker. My film is called Contradiction, A Question of Faith. I didn't go through Lionsgate. So I'm not talking about the type of films that's shooting people and murdering people. I'm talking about information. Information is not power. Information is potential power. It depends on what you do with that information. But I put the information out there, so I'm not in the filmmaking as such as this caller would think, and I'm not comparing the two. Now, when you talk about the church and the film, those are two different animals. But I can tell you one thing, not really, because they're both Hollywood. Because when you go to that church, that preacher puts on a bigger show than Denzel Washington could ever put on. Now, how has that? How you want to compare the two? I tell you what, if we would have taken that 10% and put it toward business or put it toward our children's tutoring, as opposed to giving it to an invisible being who already has streets of gold and mansions, we'd be a whole lot better off. And if the church was so great for us in the past, what happened? What happened to its holding power? Anything that's great has holding power. Why did it so-called, why are the children lost? Why are the generations lost? The reason is because we have been putting our time, our effort, and our energy into an invisible product, something that you did not create yourself. You are, speaking of a movie, we are actors that are in the wrong movie because that God did not take on the shape of our story.
800-450-7876. Let's go to Baltimore. Chris is on line 3. Chris, you're on with Jeremiah.
Yeah, good evening, gentlemen. I don't believe this gentleman ever read the Bible, and because the Bible details the history of a people called God's chosen people, and what would happen to God's chosen people if they kept the covenant that this God made with this chosen people, and what would happen if they didn't keep the covenant. Now, the gentleman said that the Bible talks about slavery and death and destruction. The God of in the Bible was a moral God. Israel would not be protected if they did not keep the commandments of their God, and the commandments was a moral commandment. It wasn't a commandment that taught men to do immorality or immoral actions. It taught men to be upright and righteous. And all religions and all faith and all law is based off of the God of the Hebrew God, Yahweh, whose name was taken from the people. So you can't blame the people for not knowing. The people, when we were taught in slavery and with our masters at that time, we weren't taught the truth. We were taught that this book was talking about another people. Why would it be talking about another people? I mean, why would they teach us who we are if
Tell you what, hang on a second, Chris. We've got to take a quick break here. Our last look at the traffic and weather, actually. I'll let you finish your thought on the other side, speaking to our guest, Jeremiah Camara, right here on FM 95.9 and AM 1450 WOL, where information is power.
Show is here daily from 4 to 7 p.m. on WOL, News Talk 1450 AM and 95.9 FM.
And thanks for staying with us, folks. I guess he's an activist and author. He's also a movie maker. His name is Jeremiah Camara. Number to call to speak to him is 800-450-7876. Before we left our last look at the traffic and weather, we're speaking with Chris in Beemore. Chris, can you put it in a question for him so Jeremiah can respond? Thank you.
Yeah. Yes, I can. I'll go into the science, a question based off of science. How is it, brother, if there is no God, if there is no creator, and everything just happened by chance or by reason of just by chance? How is it that the moon, if you watch the moon for 30 days, brother, and the moon, we told it reflects the sunlight, so the moon isn't giving off its own light. How is it that the moon go from a small crescent all the way to a full moon and then back to a crescent within 30 days, brother? How is it? And we can see
All right, let's give him a chance to respond. Thanks, Chris. Thanks, Grace. Go ahead, Jeremiah.
See, Carl, this is part of the problem right there. You know, nobody's talking about the fact that there are not laws of physics, that there's not some order in the. We're not even talking about that. You know, as far as subscribing to some man behind it, if there is this big man behind it or whatever, pushing these buttons and making the move, he ain't doing nothing for you. And if you claim I didn't, I've read the Bible, and that's the reason why I'm doing what I'm doing now, because it's the greatest argument for non-belief, if you ask me. The Bible thoroughly read is the greatest argument for non-belief. So, like I said, God is exaggerations of ourselves. Nobody said that there are not mechanisms and physics in place and laws of the universe that keep things moving and energy and forces behind these things. I'm talking about somebody throwing darts on bad people and rewarding good people type of stuff. Nobody's even talking about that. As far as Israel being protected, Israel is protected from a political sense. It had the backing of the United States, and it did a lot of corruption to get where it is today. So if black people are living in a hellhole today, then you might as well make that indictment about all of us. None of us had read it then. By that premise, if we read it and did what it said do, then we wouldn't be in the shape that we're in. That's silly. We need skills, we need intelligence, and we need to get out of this sunken place. And I'm referring to the movie Get Out. We are in the sunken place. That is a sunken place mentality. That there's, okay, so now, like, I know many people who don't subscribe to gods. And I won't say God, I'll say gods because it's plural. There are 300 million at least that are worshipped. They have that in India alone, that are doing quite well, that are prospering. Belief in a God is not a biological requirement. A bonobo, when it is born, will not even eat a banana unless he shares it with another bonobo. That is, I have a 3-year-old granddaughter who was sharing her toys at 2 years old. That is within you. You are born with everything that you need. You did not come in this world with a book. We all come from stardust. We didn't have any beliefs, any faiths, and all that kind of stuff. We have been forced to believe all of these things. I know, listen, not having read the Bible, okay. All right, so I have a family. I own my own business. My children own, one of my children own their own business. My son's about to graduate. I'm not bragging. I'm just showing you. That's not a necessity, a biological requirement that you must read the Bible. You must, no. You can prosper without all of that. There is nothing, you're talking about morals. Half these so-called prophets in the Bible were whoremongers. David was one of the most corrupt people on the face of the earth. But yet, he was a prophet of God. And those were not moral commandments. I've read the Old Testament. They don't go into detail why these other nations that were slain and that were set on fire, just because they worship false gods, go set them on fire. That's not moral. That's a story, man. We got to move on from that. Name me 3 things that we have learned that we in the church that we would not have learned through life tenure itself. Life teaches you lessons. Name 3 things. Anybody that they would have learned, that they learned in church that you would not have learned on your own. It's time to quit philosophizing in Hebrew and Yahweh. Look how silly that is. This God has a name, and he won't answer you because you're not calling him by the right name. Oh, man, it's bigger than that. If your God is concerned about those little things right now, in the next 24 hours, there are 30,000 children that are going to die due to starvation and disease. And we're sitting up here talking about I'm blessed and highly favored. What makes you so blessed and highly favored when this child is going to wake up with a tumor on his brain? This child is going to die today. There's 27 million sex slaves. in the world today. If your God is concerned about his name as opposed to children dying, he's a very petty God.
800-450-7876. Let's go to Virginia on line 6. Queen's waiting for us. Queen, you're on with Jeremiah Camara. Is Queen there on line 6? I'm not hearing Queen. Okay, let's go to line 4 then. Jan's in North Carolina. Jan?
Hello, good evening, Brother Nelson and Brother Jeremiah. Yes, I want to ask the question, why does the universe and or people allow those to gain power and resources that want to mistreat others and destroy? And also the suffering experienced by many in developing nations and around the world, is that all man-made? And thank you, I take my answer off the air.
Hello?
All right, Jeremiah? Yeah,
Now, see,
did you
that's
hear the
beautiful.
question?
Oh, absolutely. Beautiful. Now, let's look at Haiti for an example. That has nothing to do with them. They worshiping the wrong. Haiti is getting their butt kicked because of what Overture did to them years ago, kicking Napoleon's butt. They will never forgive Haiti for that. Everything is man-made that you see, while some countries are. So you mean to tell me the British are righteous? See, one of the reasons why you see what she said, why do people who exploit other people seem to prosper? Because there's no clause in the Bible that said that thou shalt not steal, but if thou do steal, thou shalt giveth it back. There's no clause in there that says that. Because ain't nobody watching you, rewarding you. You know, this is there's no promises and guarantees in life. My son sent me a video back in 2010, I believe it was, and there was a pregnant wildebeest, and there were 2 hyenas that got whiff of her, and they came over and they started disemboweling her, and her placenta fell out, and they just went to town. All of a sudden, she collapsed. That is about as cold-blooded as you can get. That's life. There are people that we are prey in life, and there are people that are out to eat us. And you are not going to. I have a slave sermon. I have 48 or 49 slave sermons. If you go on YouTube, you'll see them. They're just 10-minute snippets. But I've got one that's called Black Folks for Breakfast, telling us to walk by faith and not by sight. That is detrimental. That does nothing to our intelligence. Listen, let me just talk about this for a minute. One of the things that the church does, it robs us not only of time, but our intellect as well. You've had several studies that have indicated that countries that perceive religion as very important have lower IQs than those countries with less interest or reverence for religion. Now, I understand that IQ test is biased and all that. I get that. But you also have mathematical ability skills, spatial skills, things like visual perception, logical reasoning skills, and pattern recognition. And there are no exceptions on earth. And the rationale is that people who are less intelligent are more likely to rely on supernatural intervention to provide the answers for them. Supernatural expectations via godly interventions are found more amongst the poor and the oppressed. If black people were doing better, we would be a lot less religious. Believe me when I tell you that. Rich people or people that are doing well are, in general, less religious. But we're looking for a way out of this thing, but it's like a mouse on a spinning wheel. We're very busy in church, and we're not going anywhere. And part of the reason that we're not going anywhere is because the church limits black progress because of the rhetoric coming from the pulpit is limited itself. Most of us who go to church are subjected to listening to the same recycled messages we've been listening to all of our lives. is also limited because it keeps us suckling on the nipple of supernaturalism, keeping us overly committed to the idea of godly intervention to solve our problems. That's detrimental to our psychology. And if we don't deal with these things, we're going to be having this discussion 20 years from now, but in an even worse predicament.
All right, hold that thought right there, Jeremiah. We're going to take another break. Folks, you two can join the discussion. It's 800-450-7876. This big show rolls on from FM 95.9 and AM 1450, WOL, where information is power.
Join the morning show and Carl Nelson in the afternoon on 1450 and 95.9 WOL.
And thanks for rolling with us, folks. On your way home, please drive carefully. Our guest is Jeremiah Camara. He's an activist, he's an author, and he makes movies. The number to call to reach him right now is 800-450-7876. And Jeremiah, I'm going to let you finish up what you were saying before we left for the last break.
I don't even remember what I was saying, but I will say this right here. You know, it's just, I think, I forget who put it this way, but, you know, just something, verbal masturbation or something like that. You know, we just love to sit, you know, and talk about the Hebrew and this God. And okay, there's a guy. Let's say his name is Bob. Okay, Bob created the universe. That's how everything got here. What is Bob doing for you? See, what is his job description? Does he feed hungry people? No. Does he stop gentrification? No. Does he stop ethnic cleansing? No. Is he keeping the Chinese from taking over Africa? No. Is he making blacks more productive? No. Is he stopping bullets? No. Is he limiting the homicide rate? No. Is he teaching us the science of mating? No. Okay, well, Bob created the universe. Okay, now what? If you know right now, you know everything there is to know. That is the most important thing you can know right now, the moment. The cell to the body. The cell to all is the building block of all living things. The family to the body, to the society is what the cell is to the body. Where you have bad degenerative cells, you have a diseased state. You have cancer. You have all kind of things. When you have the family unit, which is the cell of society, where that's bad, you have a diseased society. You have a bad society. When you go in black communities and you see trash inundated amongst churches, right on the footstools of the steps of the churches all around, and I've got pictures to prove it everywhere I go. If you were to go into an individual's house and it's just nasty, that speaks to their mental state. When you see trash all around churches and we're sitting up talking about cleanliness is next to godliness, that is a reflection of our mental state. Is something wrong? And we need to, look, when you're talking about this Bible and how wonderful it is, listen, in order for this Bible to have been produced, you needed ink, you needed paper, you needed the cooperation of the church and the government, you needed politics, you needed attorneys, you needed wars, you needed marketing. It's just not this wonderful, beautiful thing that grew organically on trees. There's a story behind it. And what we need to do is make more of a conscientious effort to become more intelligent in terms of our survival skills, rather more so than our pontification skills and these books of this Bible. That is not feeding our families. It is not putting skills in the hands of our men. And if we continue to do this and pontificate endlessly on this black God, who, by the way, like I said, didn't keep you from getting on that ship. If he was so wonderful and so black and loved you so much and all that kind of stuff, he didn't keep you from getting on that ship and coming over here. He's not keeping Hades from starving right now, where the life expectancy is 42 years old. One of Haiti's biggest problems, aside from being in debt to many countries, being tricked, is they're too damn religious. Everything is about religion. That is our problem. When I help people out, in my business, they shout, "Thank you, Jesus," and I'm sitting right in front of them. We take away each other's incentive to do for one another when the only credit that we're going to give is to Jesus. And now I'm standing right in front of you. Here's a Jesus that you're worshiping who, like I said, had a bad weekend. And your ancestors suffered for centuries, yet you have more loyalty to it. When these people were going to see the Passion of the Christ movie, they were throwing up. Black folks was being carried out of there, passing out. But yeah, when you hear the story of your ancestors' enslavement, you walk upright. You don't feel that to that degree. That is what you call Stockholm Syndrome. We have fallen in love with our oppressors. And it is really insane, like I said, to think that you're going to biblically explain your way out of it because we're not following the word of God. No, Nick, you tell me that Sweden is following the word of God? Switzerland, the Netherlands have one of the best educational systems in the world, one of the best healthcare systems. You mean to tell me these white folk up there are following the word of God? Some of the most prosperous countries in the world? No. One of the reasons is because we have our eyes closed to the tricks that's being put upon us because we've been told to walk by faith and not by sight. And that will continue to put you in a trick bag and keep us on the bottom for centuries to come unless we deal with this critical issue.
All right. Got a bunch of folks still want to get to you, Jeremiah. 800-450-7876 is the number. Queen, I think Queen is back with us, calling from Virginia on line 6. Queen, are you there?
I'm here. Peace.
All right. You're on with Jeremiah.
Woo, that was close. My phone was on mute. Yes, Jeremiah, can you spell your last name so I can look it up?
Camara.
Camara. Okay. I have been
and
screaming.
You can watch my book. You can watch my movie for free. And like the other caller said, listen here, brother. I'm not with Lionsgate or nobody else. I produced that myself. So I'm not part of that whole crowd that you talk about.
Jeremiah Camara. Okay.
And my film is called Contradiction, The Question of Faith, and you can watch it for free on Amazon Prime, or you can order the DVD. But you don't have to tithe to me 10% every time I get on the air.
Well, that's fine. That's fine too. But I do understand consideration and compensation. But I wanted to say when I got in a little late, but when I heard the statement you were making about churches and the hours spent and this, that, and the third, I have been on that. That's been in my spirit, so to speak, for the past 2 years. And I have been speaking it, and I challenge myself to bring it up to those who can do something about it.
Right. Well, let me say this, though.
Which is that?
Right. Let me say this. One of the reasons why our church services are so long, and again, we bring certain traditions from us during this, from this American enslavement period, okay? And one of the reasons why blacks love to attend church during our enslavement period, and I don't call us slaves, I say that we were enslaved.
Right.
Because like I stated before, we were born with everything we needed. We didn't come out of our mother's womb with a book. Your mom did not have to say, let me turn to John or Corinthians or, James or whatever to see how I can love my child. That's not a biological requirement. But one of the reasons why we love to attend church during our enslavement period was because it was precisely during those times that they took a reprieve from labor. See, and that's why there was so much amening And so much, you tell them, preacher, yes, sir, master, so much of that going on, so much encouragement. Because as long as the master was quoting scripture and making up scripture and all this kind of telling you that you need to obey him and all this kind of stuff, the slaves wouldn't have to be out there in the field working.
Well, it was also as a if you don't mind me cutting in, I also saw from my reading and just understanding, it was a time for planning also until it was watched and monitored, but there were still ways to do it. However, the church I grew up in, we were not required to tithe. So all of the bad experiences or some of the bad experiences people speak of, I didn't experience in the one church I grew up in. It wasn't a major, It was a little church on the bottom of a hill. It's still there, and they still don't do the tithing. They still, I guess individuals if they want to, but my question is, and I really didn't have a question, I just had a comment, so I better hurry up. I'm glad to hear on national radio, thank you, Carl Nelson, for this guest and all your other guests, for bringing up a subject, because at this point, the faith community has to step in, step up, and stand up for our youth, for our adults, for our mentally disabled, whoever physically disabled. People talk about it, jail and prison. You did something to break the law to be there and don't want to go visit. By the way, August 19th is the Millions for Prisoners Human Rights March right in D.C., August the 19th. But when people go to the hospital, they've broken biblical dietary laws. But we'll go to the hospital and give a card and, oh, let me pray for you and I love you and hope you get better. Let's go see your family and friends in the prisons now. We got to uplift them too, church folks. That's all I had to say, and I'm going to get on off of here. Thank you.
You know, when we don't need preachers. Like I said, when you go to church, if you're honest, you hear the same thing. We don't need these preachers to have you coming in every Sunday your whole life. Don't try to fix the world. If we fix ourselves, the world's going to be fine. We have to raise the human consciousness. Fix yourself. There's no movement. The movement is checked. Like, for instance, 10%. Do you know how much more productive?
Hold that calculation right there, Jeremiah. We got to take our last break. I'll let you finish on the other side. Folks, you too can join the discussion. 800-450-7876. We'll take your calls next as the big show rolls on from Radio 1's flagship station right here on FM 95.9 and AM 1450 WOL, where information is power.
News that's close to home. Close to home. Listen, WOL, News Talk 1450 AM and 95.9 FM.
And thanks for staying with us, folks. Our guest is Jeremiah Camara. As I mentioned, he's an activist, he's an author, he's a filmmaker. His film is called Contradiction, and he says you can watch it for free. So just Google it, or Google his name, and you'll find out he tells those slave sermons, interesting comments about sermons, slave sermons. That's it. Just check him out. But before we go back to him, let me remind you, coming up in the next few days, you're going to hear from Dr. Renoka Rashidi. He's going to give us an update on his trips to Cuba and Mexico. Also, Brother Kush, the Black Unifier from Positive Comedic Visions. Right here in Washington, D.C. And also Dr. Mawalana Karenga, the man who created Kwanzaa, is going to join us. So tell your friends to keep it locked right here on FM 95.9 and AM 1450 WOL. So, Jeremiah, I'm going to let you finish up what you're saying before we take some more calls for you.
One of the things is that after the alarm, the Nat Turner's insurrection caused, after it kind of died away, the slaveholders had to come up with something that would, give the slaves more religious instruction to keep them from murdering their masters. And so, like I said in the beginning, this was something to keep us busy, stay out of grown folks' business. Don't worry about how much cotton I have to pick to yield a profit. Don't worry about how much cotton in proportion to the square footage on this plantation that's needed and how much weight is needed to be picked in order for me to make a profit. You stay out of that economic business and you go on over there and you pray to your Jesus, and hopefully one day you'll get to heaven. And we're still doing that now. Like I said, a good slave is not going to question his master, but a bad slave is going to say, where did you get this Bible from? How is it going to help me? Why are you giving it to me? And who gave it to you? And these are the questions that we need to be asking. But, the brother talked about the moon. I have a huge telescope in my office. I'm in admiration of the stars. I can probably tell this brother, teach him many things about the cosmos, because astrology is one of my hobbies. I love the universe. I can't wait to see the eclipse. I have a solar shield on it where I can look at it. So I love these type of things, okay? But just like my brother from India, Sadhguru Jagi Vasudev said, he said, gravity is not Christian. Gravity is not, the stars are not Yahweh. Electromagnetism is not Islam. Solar energy is not Judaism. It doesn't matter what you identify yourself as. I don't even recognize people as Muslim and Hindu and Christian, only human beings. Religion compels people to either believe or disbelieve, and that's a fallacy. Just like they'll say, well, you don't believe in God? That is a loaded question, because you're assuming that there is one. We are, like my brother from India said, we are bred, born, and raised on assumptions. If you really want to learn something, leave all your assumptions at the door and come with an open mind. But part of the reasons why blacks are so married to religion is because of fear. You know how many black relationships perish because the man, most of the time, has come into some knowledge about this make-believe mythological religion, but the woman is refusing to even hear the brother out, to hear what he has to say. One of the worst things that you can be is closed-minded. We think that it's a 10-story drop once we let all of these things go. It's not a 10-story drop. It's a 10-inch drop. What do we replace it with? We replace it with each other. What is wrong with worshiping each other? People that you can see and touch. I'm not talking about being arrogant. Being arrogant is having too high of an opinion of oneself. You think I don't worship my children, my wife, and my grandchild? I worship them. I would die for them. I worship them. Anytime you got a book that says you need to deny your mother and your father for my sake, not me and my family. I'm not denying and come and worship. No. That's something that is a doctrine. That is not a universal principle. That is not a law of nature. That is a law of man, because we don't realize how Christianity even got started in the first place, or religion got started in the first place. And that's what we need to go back to. See how all this stuff was put together, how it all came into being. It's a legacy that has always fostered sexism and racism, the intolerance of difference, and, the desecration of the natural environment. That's how it started. The church throughout its history has a disregard for human freedom. It's not free will. If I tell you to go out there and pick that cotton, you got your free will to go out there and pick that cotton. But if you don't, I'm going to whip you. That's not free will. That's extortion. And you see it every day in the church. If you don't tithe, your Creflo Dollars of the world, tithing is your covenant connector. You're scaring people to death. That's how you have them under your thumbnail. That's how you were able to get I can't remember the number now, $65, $70 million jet. And the very street that Creflo Dollar is on is inundated with drugs and crime. But you were able to pimp people out of $70 million because you have them afraid. Fear is the grease that keeps the wheels of religion turning.
All right, let's take some more calls here. We're racing the clock now. 800-450-7876, line 5. Dr. Eugene, you're on with Jeremiah.
Hello, brother. Hello, brothers. I'm blessed, and I'm highly favored. And, brother, you are blessed, and you are highly favored, by whom we are not going to discuss. You are articulate. You are knowledgeable. You open up my eyes to something that I was not aware of. But I want to ask you a question, brother. I use the Bible, biblical instruction, before leaving earth. That's what I use that book for. And I use the Bible to educate young boys and girls who are trying to improve their scores, their verbal scores on the SAT. I want to ask you a question. Have you ever read Grounded in the Word, a guide to mastering standardized test vocabulary and biblical comprehension? You don't have to answer that. If you're not familiar with it, If you're not familiar with it, then you might go to Amazon.com and look it up. That book is used to help young people. And I'm doing it not from a religious frame of reference. I did this book from a spiritual frame of reference. I wanted to help kids to improve their verbal skills.
Right. And Dr. Eugene, if you can put in a question for him, because we got a bunch of folks who want to speak to him, we're racing the clock. So I'd appreciate it.
The question is, what is your purpose in life?
All right, let's give him a chance to respond. Thank you, Dr. Eugene. Jeremiah?
Let me answer that question. There was a gentleman, his name was Dan Barker. We were in St. Louis. I don't have a purpose of life. I have a purpose in life. See, when you say a purpose of life, that's like a top down, like there's this purpose that, this God has for me. It's almost like I'm a puppet and someone is pulling my strings. I create purpose in life by doing things that are purposeful. So if I want meaning in my life, I do things that are meaningful. At my job, 75%, and I've owned this business for 16 years, 75% of my guys have been ex-felons that I've hired off the street. I don't need God or any book to tell me to do that. I come with everything. I'm born with everything that I need within me, and we all are. That is the greatest con in the world, that you are somehow inherently deficient and that you are a sinner and that you have to repent and all these things. That's a con job. So my purpose is not, I don't have those questions, the purpose of life. I have a purpose in life, and that purpose is to do things that are purposeful. So I have been a mentor for many people. If you can use that Bible, brother, to help people, my hat is off to you. It doesn't matter. But let me just say this. There is not a book on the shelf of Borders, Barnes & Nobles, or Caribou books, or Medu books. There's not a book on that shelf that does not have something of value. And the Bible has something of value. The Quran has something of value. No book on a shelf that is devoid of something of value. It all can teach you something. There are lessons in so many things. So if you want to use that book to do what you do, hey, my hat's off for you.
All right, we're going to keep rolling. 800-450-7876. Cookie's calling us on line 2 from the district. Cookie, you're on with Jeremiah.
Good evening, Jeremiah and Carl. I have 2 quick things I wanted to say. First of all, Carl, when you I used to use what you say when you when you get ready to get off the line, you say, and stay in the light. I used to have that on my email, as a bottom, a little tag at the bottom. But lately I've been hearing that Illuminati means the enlightened one. And it's like, I wanted to Carl know about that, right? I don't know if it has, I didn't look at it the Illuminati way. I looked at it the way you looked at it, but I just wanted to throw that out there to you. I've been compelled to call in and say that to you. But, Brother Jeremiah, I'm in total agreement with everything you're saying. It's amazing how, I'm glad to be I think I'm fortunate to be on the radio at this time listening at you, because I'm totally open-minded, and I'm glad you're saying all what you're saying. One of the things I wanted to say is that what I don't understand, because I'm not into labels and all that stuff neither, and I love nature too. What I don't understand is that I think I may understand, but I want to hear you say something about it. Now, some things, you know how some things are stated and then they follow it with a verse in the Bible to let you see that the Bible said this was going to happen and it's happening now. How is it that I think I know the answer, but why is it that things that's in the Bible? I haven't read the Bible. I'm not a Bible reader.
Because we're running out of time. Can you just crystallize your question so he can respond real quick?
Okay. How is it that things are happening that's in the Bible? They are happening now that's in the Bible. How did they know that it was going to happen enough to put it in the Bible? Thank you.
Let me say this. So a lot of the so-called predictions that we've seen about there's always been mothers against daughters and fathers against sons. A lot of things, it has always been. That's just time. Time, brings about changes. And there's this thing, and it's too lengthy to get into, but look up this word called typology. And that is one of the ways they could so-called predict, to connect the Old Testament to the New Testament, is a methodology called typology, where they take the stories of the Old Testament and they make sure that they match up. Like if you look at the story of Joshua
and Jeremiah, we got to run because we're just flat out of time. But real quick,
okay,
how can folks reach you? Are you on Facebook?
I'm on Facebook. You can reach me there. You can reach me at jeremiahcamara.com. You can watch the film. It's on Amazon Prime. You can watch it for free, or you can order the DVD.
Right. All right, we're going to do that, but we flat out of time. I thank you, and we'll have you back, and we'll discuss some more of this.
All right,
thank you. All right, we appreciate you too. Folks are out of here. Stay strong, stay positive, stay in the light. We'll see you.